Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
It's the time of the show where we welcome back onto the show the lovely Myra Azzopardi from Citizens Advice Bureau Spain. Good morning to you, Myra.
Good morning, everyone.
Good to have you with us. How are you doing, by the way? Are you well?
I'm well. Still busy, 24/7.
As always. So today we're talking, amongst other things, about joint bank accounts. Is this what we're kicking off to? By the way, listeners, 952-78-4000, you've got questions, or studio@tre.radio, or WhatsApp me, +34 645 99 67 95. So, joint bank accounts. What is the deal, Myra? What should we know?
Okay. I suppose for the morbid ending to that is, but it's important, joint bank accounts after a death in Spain.
Okay.
We're just talking about
Super, right,
Spain.
That's okay.
Okay, shall I start?
Please do. Otherwise, I'm going to be flapping around like a wet fish that's fallen out of the Tangier fish market. So please, you go ahead, and I will be quiet. Okay?
No, you intersect where you need to. Okay, we all know many people worry about accounts being frozen after a partner dies. This doesn't have to be, it can be any people in a joint account. It doesn't have to be husband and wife, common law partners, can be two family members. So some delay notifying the bank to avoid restrictions. Mm-hmm. But depending on the account type, this can still result in a partial or full freeze.
Okay.
So that I think a lot of people, and I know a lot of people have asked us, sometimes we'd quietly say, well, we can't tell you, but we do know that the locals tend to not the bank, which is actually illegal.
Yeah.
You should tell the bank that your partner or whoever it is, the joint title holder has passed. But there is an option here.
Okay.
Because you may wish to choose an account where the surviving partner can inform the bank and continue to access the funds legally. So this is really so I can highlight the importance of choosing the right type of joint account. If everybody's with me.
So basically,
up to now.
So
does
basically,
it make sense?
with a joint bank account and you know the other signatory or the name of the bank account, if they pass on, but you should inform. Presumably, you can't just phone up and say, by the way, so you need to provide some sort of official form, one imagine, rather than sort of hearsay. So presumably, yeah.
Some banks, depending, how banks are all different, I doubt they'll ask for a death certificate. That stage they may do, but that's as much as they can do. Remember, a bank's a bank. It's not a lawyer. It doesn't know about inheritance taxes, and it has an obligation to the state.
Okay.
As well as to its clients.
Wow.
So, so they may ask you for something. They must just think that you're not messing around. You haven't gone in there. It's not April Fool's, and you've not gone in and said your partners. I'm sorry.
So we're looking at sort of. I mean, can you continue a joint bank account and bring somebody else in, or can you? Because presumably you can't operate a joint bank account on your own, because that then you don't have a joint bank account. I mean, explain, enlighten me.
I'll enlighten you. Because there's a lot of confusion about joint bank accounts. When one holder dies. So has something recently changed? No, it hasn't, because, again, going back to banks will act differently. Mainly, they will freeze the full account or 50% of the account. So this is where the confusion comes from, the way banks handle accounts after a death. And that can look very different from what the law actually allows. Okay?
Yeah.
The legal rules about how the surviving holder may operate the account is that, let me just say, I'll go to that later on. There are rules, but what causes the problems is banks applying restrictive internal procedures, and that's because they want to protect themselves from liability in compliance with inheritance tax requirements. So that's their obligation. So basically, I don't think a lot of people know, but there are two types of joint bank accounts. in Spain, and the different structures. One is known as mancomunada, where both must sign together, putting it clearly. Mancomunada, where both must sign together. I think everybody knows about those banks. You can't do anything unless you both sign the check or you both sign whatever it is, whatever transaction. I'm sorry. Then there's an indistinta or solidaria. They're both the same, where each holder may operate the account independently from one another, right? Yeah. As an independent. That's the indistinta or solidaria, which basically, I'm repeating, where either holder may operate the account independently. Of course, this distinction is vital because many people do not realize which one they have, and the consequences after a death are very different. Okay?
Yeah.
So we'll do it like a question. So what happens to a mancomunal account when one holder dies? The account is effectively frozen. Like I said, sometimes it's 50%. The banks are just doing whatever they feel or they know. So the surviving holder cannot use the money at all unless they have express consent from every heir of the deceased before the bank will allow any movement of funds. That's not likely to happen. You're not going to, at this stage, somebody's died, we haven't even opened the will, we don't know who the beneficiaries are.
Yeah.
So this has always been the rule, and it causes delays. So people signing that type of mancomunidad, in other words, a joint bank account where they both have to sign together without realizing the consequences. So what happens to an indistinta or solidaria account when one holder dies? Again, this is the account where you're signing separately. And this is where people are surprised. In these accounts, the surviving holder may continue to operate the account as normal. In other words, we're presuming at this stage nothing is frozen. Legally, they're allowed to use the money without needing permission from the heirs. This is not a new rule either. This is long established, backed by the Banco de España guidance and repeated Supreme Court doctrine. So it shows that there's been Supreme Court cases. It shows that the banks have even been confused. So the surviving holder has a right of disposition, in other words, to the funds.
Yeah.
So in this case, why do banks still freeze these accounts? Because the banks prefer to take a cautious approach. Once they learn that a holder has died, many banks automatically restrict the account until certain documents are provided. Basically, the inheritance has been accepted. Few may take some kind of other documentation, but normally it's when the inheritance has been accepted. That clears them, doesn't it? But of course, they shouldn't be doing this. It depends. So another question when we're looking at this, where you are signing separately, in other words, Fred can go into the bank and sign 100,000 to anybody, or Mary can go into the bank and do the same without the other signatory. Okay, this is the ones that we're considering that people may wish to hold. But also, there's always little buts.
Okay.
Being a co-titular, being a co-title holder, being one only gives the right to operate the account. It does not automatically give ownership of the money. For inheritance purposes, because what actually matters is the origin of the funds. If the money comes from the deceased, it forms part of their estate, if that makes sense. The bank knows that money came in from Mary, and it forms part of their estate. So this is the little blip, really. The surviving holder may still have access to the account, but that does not mean they own what is in it, because heirs may challenge withdrawals. This has happened a lot if they believe the funds belong to the deceased. It's very important to clear with the bank what's what as well. I think it's, people should go and have a little chat, because people use their banks, they go and talk about this has gone wrong or that's gone wrong or my online's not working, but I think they should consider, because I can't say should, consider going into the bank, make an appointment with the director and saying, look, we want to make sure you understand our bank account. And if If you need to change it, you can change it then. But we need for you to understand whose the funds actually are, even though we're sharing them.
Can I just?
That's in case.
I've just made some notes, and I just need to. I just as quickly. I've got a couple of points, maybe coming from this that I'd like to. I mean, presumably the bank would push you to, when in doubt, embargo the account, or at least the liability, if you've got the Mani Camara, because. Until you have, and how interesting, quote unquote, the division of an estate can be after the death of somebody, and so the bank is going to want to say, okay, everything hold on, because there can be disputes on who's got what and where, and so they would. Yes. If you don't know there are two types of account, they would, in their own interest, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing with the banks, but they have to, because imagine being sued by an estate, to push you to that first. The man, the man Camara? The man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they may wish to do that, but that's not their choice, you see.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we have court rulings on what happens afterwards. That doesn't mean that bank directors are like others up with the law. Or even checked, or even know that there's been court cases, rulings.
Because with the other one, with the Solidaria, or in the Tinker, you're trying to, if the estate is disputed and you're trying to prove who put what in and when, that is a whole kettle of pescado. And if you've got access to that as the surviving, you could take that out and go, right, you can argue about it later, but so and so, and that again, yes.
This is where problems can occur. But remember that with that kind of account, if the director doesn't know whose is which, or it's just your money, communal money, then you have access to all that. So this is why I think, from what you've just said as well, it might be a good idea to go and have a chat with your bank director. Have a nice long... if you can find them in there, in between coffees.
Yes, coming up to Christmas.
Go in there.
Yeah, before the 6th and the 8th. That's it, yeah.
Yes. Go in there. Try and make an appointment as soon as possible if you're concerned about this, and make sure that they know. Of course, because, again, the money could be communal money. It could come from came from both of you. You both sold your property in the UK or somewhere, and you put the money in. And the bank may not realise that and think, yes, it's indistinto, solidaria. They can sign on their own, but I don't know the origin of the funds. Origin of the funds. Yeah. I think this is something needs to be done really from younger people now, when money is going in. Younger couples or co-title holders should start thinking a little bit more about not just opening the bank and just putting your money in, but looking forward. Nobody wants to look forward when you're young to the moment when one of you is going to pass, but you never know when that's going to happen. And I think it's something that should be discussed with the banks. But the banks, it's much like going to doctors. They talk about the actual what's happening, but not all the roundabout bits, if you know what I mean, putting it in.
Here's another question for you, Myra. What if you, and we're doing worst case scenarios. So first of all, if you are with a partner, if your wife or whatever, you get this sorted out before the unthinkable happens, because if the unthinkable does happen, you're going to be so full of what's going on that the last thing you want to do is start arguing with your bank about, I need to get these out. And my second point is, presumably we're talking about people passing away, and I'm sorry to be all doom and gloom on a Friday, but if you were in a situation where you were incapacitated, for example, if you were in a hospital, you were in some sort of awful thing that happened, and you were unable to communicate, or you were in a deep, we've been put in an induced coma for a couple of, it could be weeks. Presumably there is a medical, and I'm throwing you a curveball here, so I'm not expecting you to know chapter and verse, but presumably there's a proviso for that as well with a joint account. Again, speak to your bank.
Well, this is going off topic a little bit, but this is where in the UK it's known as a lasting power of attorney comes in, where in Spain it's not quite the same. They have typical, sort of similar, but it's in UK it's for funds, financial and health reasons. Whereas in Spain there'd be two separate power of attorneys, one for your financial and one for your medical. Your medical is not actually done as a power of attorney. It's done in a different way. We'll do a program sometime with the hunters of your region. So one would be a power of attorney and one would be the choice with the hunter. But remember, people often give the other partner the lasting power of attorney or right. Now, if you're, like you say, in a hospital and you can't move and you've got the power of attorney, or your partner's got the power of attorney, this is why it's difficult. And I think people could really, this is where I come in as a consultant, which I am. You know, I'm paralegal and I'm a consultant, and people can ask me questions. Every case will be distinct, different to each other, so people can actually reach me as a consultant. I'm not just an advisor for Citizens Advice. I'm a consultant either with Citizens Advice or through another vehicle. So I think it's important because you're asking the questions, and people now who are listening to this will also have a lot of questions. But the second part to the question you've asked is, remember that you have 6 months. Don't leave it till the last minute. So if you're in hospital, you're having an operation, you've got your lawyer already working for you on accepting the inheritance, for example. You've got 6 months. I always tell people, if you lose somebody, please don't concentrate on the legalities. Concentrate on your grieving and getting together with family and friends. That's the most important thing. Your funeral director will get the death certificate, that sort of thing. The most important thing is for you to be able to start your grieving process without having legalities. You know, can you imagine, as you said, you've got something awful has just happened. Some people can hardly cope, and then you're thinking, oh my God, I've got to do this, I've got to pay taxes if applicable, and even if not applicable, you've still got to put in the forms. So it can be very confusing. So I always remind people you have 6 months, because if there's taxes or not to be paid, there's also the plusvalia to the town hall, and you can get charges. So you really need to think you have the 6 months. Don't leave it till the last minute. And get your legal advisor in as soon as possible.
But again,
let him have or her have the headaches.
I mean, it might be a good idea as well just to get out and see your bank manager if you can find him, because they like having chats. And they like, you know, if you're not just approaching them to say, why have you embargoed me again? Or, you know, I do this or the other. But if you say, by the way, you know, we heard Myra from Citizens Advice Bureau on Talk Radio Europe talking about joint accounts. Can you just explain to me? Because again, a lot of people won't have, they're just going like joint account, boom, and say in the event of what would be the process. And I'm sure that they'd be quite happy to do that because forewarned is forearmed, etc.
Yes, and that's before you even open the account. But then we have to think about if you've already got your account as mancomunada, where you're signing together. Yeah? Yep. So in that case, this is when you do need to go and talk to the bank. And you want to say, I've heard this talk or whatever, I've spoken to a consultant, and now I wish for our bank account, type of bank account to be changed. Yes, they can do that. Yeah?
Yeah, okay.
But what you have to do is you go in, you make your appointment. If you're asking for a indistinta solidaria where you have rights to the funds, make sure that all account holders sign the request, obviously. And the account isn't tied up in complicated products, loans, mortgages that might complicate the change, or you haven't got debts. If you've got debts, the bank's not going to want to change anything. You should get written confirmation from the bank that the regime is now indistinta /solidaria. But that does not change the legality of whose the funds are. So remember, you've got access. But if, and it does happen, because I have examples of somebody saying we're divorcing, I actually bought a house in both names, but the money came from my bank account, only from me, for the sale of my property. So this is where money then could be put into a bank account besides. And also when it goes a lot further, doesn't it? It starts going on to other parts, you know, who bought the house, whose money bought the house. But on this today we're talking about the bank account. So if anybody's concerned and they've got this almost communal, we can say, they're co-signatories and they must both sign together and they're worried about the freezing of a bank account, is to go and speak to the director. Make sure, if sometimes you're speaking to somebody, don't be put off. If you see that the director is not understanding what you're talking about, and that's a possibility.
Yeah, indeed.
You can't really go in thinking, oh, this director's going to be on the ball. Well, hopefully you do go in thinking that. But if he's not, don't just walk away with him saying, well, really, you've got this account and don't worry, and blah, and you walk away. Because so many people, some bank managers can be friendly and they know the locals tend to do it and they keep your money there. They don't really say anything, but they could be in big trouble, putting it clearly, by accepting or turning a blind eye.
Yeah, and obviously...
Because inheritance consequences. Yeah. And then you've got the beneficiaries. The beneficiary's going to go and blame. They can. The bank director allowed the money to be used or whatever. It's quite complicated, but I think just to simplify it, is the two types of bank accounts. Either you're signing together and therefore they can freeze 50% or all. Some bank managers will freeze 50% of that type of account. They can actually freeze all of it.
And if they are worried about liability, and you know how these things operate, Myra, you've been here long enough. If they can freeze it all, and then come and see me, but to get it unfrozen is leaping through hoops. And in the worst case scenario, of course, you would then want to do that if you are going through some particular marital issue as well. I mean, yes, who knows where that one could end up? Fascinating stuff, indeed. But And direct debits, and your direct debits, you want those to continue. But of course, yeah, all your phones and whatever else and whatever you've got going out.
Yes,
yeah,
all the money that's going out. So people do find complications. It's a lot deeper, but that's why I keep saying people can contact me if they want more information, or they can speak to their lawyer who has expertise in this field, and find out all the nitty-gritties. But basically for people, there are two types of bank accounts, the joint accounts. Either the mancomunada, where you sign together, or the indistinta or solidaria, both the same, where you sign separately, where the money is still legally belonging to one or the other, or to both of you. I think that's what's really important, to understand and have a look what type. Well, you'll know what type of bank account you have, if you need both signatures. And again, with the indistinta and solidaria, banks will often freeze, and that's why there's court cases.
So if people want to get in touch, Myra, and get some more information, presumably have you written about this on the excellent website? Or
Not yet, because if I, with respect to the radio station and the interview, I have the article ready, but it's very rare that sometimes I will post before. If I want, say, you to have reference, I could direct you there. But now it's in the draft. It's in a draft, ready to go ahead. And also people ask, obviously they're at work, I hope. I posted today about, a little thing I made where it says, knowledge is not free, you have to pay attention. So I posted that under the recent post about this program. So people will ask, is this available? Then usually others will come in before me because I'm on the radio and say you can get it on Listen Again or Listen Live. Or sometimes you kindly send me the recording, which would go onto the article. But yes, people can contact us. I suggest they go to the website first. They can go on the Facebook group. We're now 94,000 and growing.
Yes.
I mean, not because I think quality is always better than quantity. It can be harder work for us when you're heading to 100,000. And some people either don't read our rules or don't understand what we are. It is a forum, but it isn't really open to debate. Somebody asked why we closed threads the other day, and a lot of people said, we like that. Yes, how dare you close threads?
I'm sure it's very
Given
entertaining.
correctly by
Very
admin.
entertaining for them, but not for you having to deal with all the interesting bits and pieces. Myra, we're going to run out of time. Just give me the first. Where should people go to get more information about this?
Okay. Just Google Citizens Advice Spain. You don't even have to put the bureau in, and we come up straight at the top. And you've got the website, and there is a section there that says "Ask for Advice."
Marvellous. Myra, as always,
that.
I'm going to run out of time, but Myra Azzopardi, Citizens Advice Bureau Spain, once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Giles. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.